you realize how certain individuals are headed to ascend mountains? Indeed, for some purposes, they take the simple course, strolling on trails to arrive at the top. In any case, what might be said about caves? Back in 2020, there was this individual who was definitely not a star, yet he figured he could deal with the most profound cavern on the planet without help from anyone else. Fair warning, things didn't end up great. Anyway, what truly occurred? This is Fatal Tragedies with the narrative of Sergey. Veryovkina Cavern, Abkhazia, a beautiful region in Georgia, upheld by Russia, flaunts the world's most profound known cave, the Veryovkina Cavern. This cavern has a moderately little entry, prompting a labyrinth of rough sections that dive further into the limestone of the world's covering. Arranged in the Arabica Massif of the Gagra mountain reach in the western Caucasus, between the Kripost and Zont mountains, it arrives at a noteworthy profundity of 2,212 meters. The Arabica Massif is a monstrous development of limestone, bragging layers Upper Jurassic and Lower Cretaceous limestone that are north of 2 kilometers thick. Georgia invests wholeheartedly in being home to each of the 4 of the world's most profound known caves, with Krubera Cavern holding the title prior to being outperformed by Veryovkina Cavern at 2,205 meters. Strangely, when Veryovkina Cavern was first found in 1968, it was only 115 meters down. Notwithstanding, through ensuing campaigns, it has consistently become further, displaying the continuous investigation of these striking underground scenes. The entry to this cavern sits high above at 2,285 meters above ocean level, making it all in all a move to reach. This cavern is no common one. It's viewed as the Everest of buckling, known for its outrageous trouble and risk. It's certainly not really for amateurs. Other than the difficult entry, the actual cavern is a special and imposing experience. It keeps a crisp temperature going from 4 to 7 degrees, with 100% air mugginess. The initial 400 meters are unimaginably harsh, including claustrophobic ways that add to the test. As you go down to around 800 meters, little streams and feeders show up, making portions of the cavern sodden and, surprisingly, overflowed. Envision pussyfooting along, wanting to think not to venture out into the water. At the base lies a huge maze, with entries going from 3 to 5 meters in certain spots and surpassing 15 meters in others. A few entries lead to impasses, while others are totally lowered and ready to be investigated. It resembles entering a genuine underground experience loaded with secrets and difficulties. Going from the top to the base and back up in this cavern is not easy at all for proficient speleologists. It requires about 7 days, and it's quite hazardous. There was this one time when a group of these cavern specialists nearly caused problems. Covered and overwhelmed in 2018, Veryovkina Cavern had a significant episode that Public Geographic covered. It was really extreme, nearly transforming into an all-out catastrophe for the whole endeavor, which included photographic artist Robbie Sparkled. Back in spring of that year, Sparkled and his colleague Jeff Swim joined a Russian group that had proactively established a worldwide best by arriving at the cavern's base. This time, they weren't attempting to go further. They needed a more critical glance at the cavern and its animals, investigating expected new entries. The endeavor, drove by Pavel Demidov, contained 9 first-rate cavers, equipped with heaps of stuff, weeks of hermetically sealed food, great many feet of rope, and getting over hardware fit for mountains. It took them 4 overwhelming days to arrive at the cavern's base, just barely getting through restricted spaces, scaling limestone walls, and exploring sloppy, water-filled burrows. Sparkled, catching each second with his camera, archived the excursion. Then, at that point, everything went horribly wrong for one daytime during breakfast in the cavern's most profound camp. The sinkhole began shaking, as though a tremor hit, and unexpectedly, a gigantic downpour of white water burst out, flooding the cavern. Sparkled clearly recalls the sound, portraying it as a stunning thunder. The water, a floodbeat, surged in savagely, starting a huge number of feet over the surface. Presently, I realize you could think, why not simply swim in that frame of mind, as it's rising, and let it convey you to the surface? That could work in a pool, yet not a progression of sporadic, rough sinkholes, where one bonk on the head can mean demise. How, you inquire? A few segments were at that point, pools requiring swimming, and others were tight, to such an extent that cavers needed to get themselves through. The flood was no standard stream. It shot out like a discharge hydrant. Sparkled thought, we need to leave at this moment. In the event that we simply stay nearby, we as a whole will pass on. Notwithstanding a cargo train of floodwaters, everybody raced to the surface, fixing their suits and abandoning gear. Sparkled, leaving everything with the exception of his camera's memory cards, focused on the direness. The flood endured 20 hours, and it was stunning. Wonderfully, every campaign part made it out securely. They set up camp at 6,233 feet down, facing a huge challenge to rest and recuperate after the frightening experience. We can all concur that being the most profound cavern on the planet, it just draws in the most trying of individuals. One of these individuals was Sergey Kozeyev. The appalling Sergey Kozeyev was 37 years of age by then and was living in Sochi, Russia. He was joyfully hitched and had 2 children with his significant other. One morning in November 2020, he said his farewells to them, jumped into his vehicle, and drove off without referencing where. Little did his family know, he had an arrangement handling the immense Veryovkina cave in Abkhazia, the adjoining country. Sergey was no more peculiar to sports. He was a Russian mountain climber in first-rate shape, into long-distance races and a wide range of athletic undertakings. Regardless of being moderately new to buckling, having attempted it just 2 times in his old neighborhood, Sergey thought it'd be an exhilarating plan to take on Veryovkina cave solo. Indeed, not the most ideal arrangement clearly. After a lengthy drive to Abkhazia, he stopped from a distance and traveled to the cavern entrance. There, he pressed his stuff into 3 packs, hung a rope, and slid into a practically upward shaft. In Veryovkina cave, there are 6 camps at various profundities where you can rest. The initial 400 meters are a genuine test-height, claustrophobic, and intense to explore. Sergey's most memorable stop was at Camp 380, where he had a feast of pasta and ketchup, arranging his plummet to Camp 600. Living there for 7 days, he appreciated caver accommodating food, indeed, more pasta and ketchup, and appeared to be having a great time. Much to his dismay, that this was where things would take a go. Presently, this sounds sort of insane. In any case, picture this, Sergey Kozeyev, simply an ordinary person, dropping the most profound cavern known to people, outfitted with just screen captures on his telephone and a small printed map. Regardless of being a complete beginner, he pushed on to the trickier pieces of the cavern. Around 1,100 meters down, where things get truly testing, the cavern turns wet and cold. Water is all over, continually sprinkling on you as you plummet. This isn't simply a minor burden, it's a significant gamble. Without legitimate stuff, you're playing with hypothermia, and passing can surprise you in this freezing climate. Up until this point, Sergey was doing a firm, making it to the extent that 1,100 meters, identical to 11 football pitches of bad to the bone, buckling a noteworthy accomplishment. However, at that point, inconvenience struck. The running water expanded, something Sergey obviously wasn't ready for, on the grounds that he hadn't even brought a wetsuit. Envision being continually sprinkled with freezing cold water in a freezing place that is a recipe for getting cold genuine quick. His stuff, from dress to the 2 jomars without stirrups, was simply not cutting it. Sergey failed to remember some pivotal hardware, and that is when things went south. Depleted and doused, he attempted to press on, however, before long, acknowledged he was excessively drained and exhausted. Freezing, he settled on the difficult decision not to proceed. There and afterward, the genuine battle started. Sergey chose to climb back up to the camp where he'd remained for 7 days. The issue? The gear he had couldn't get him back up. He endlessly attempted, sprinkled with water meanwhile. However, he simply didn't have the solidarity to move without stirrups. It's muddled the way that long he endured. However, in the end, he needed to surrender at the foundation of the well he'd been making a respectable attempt to move out of. In a chilling new development, Sergey Kozeyev wound up nestled into, connected to his rope, alone at a stunning profundity of 1,100 meters on the planet's most profound cavern. Tragically, Sergey couldn't persevere through the brutal circumstances and surrendered to the virus. Days transformed into weeks, and his non-attendance raised alerts. Envision the concern and dread that filled his significant other and kids. The youngsters requesting their mom the whereabouts from their father, just to be told, "I don't know," by the same token. His current better half, seeing the earnestness of the circumstance, revealed him missing when he didn't get back from his typical performance experiences. For 9 anguishing months, Sergey appeared to have disappeared suddenly. Then, on August 4, 2021, the Perovsky Club campaign drove by A. Barashkov tracked down an individual's body 1,100 meters somewhere down in the extensive Veryovkina cavern, where they had gone for an investigation. The individual was holding tight a railing utilizing 2 jumars with long expansions, and there were no stirrups, a serious infringement of neighborhood rules. They were 3 meters over the edge's base. On the edge beneath, there was a vehicle containing 2 fixed cell phones and a multi-tool. Something was awry. As they arrived at Camp 1, they tracked down a pack of hardware with rotten tennis shoes. Plummeting further into the cavern, they found dispersed pieces of hardware, raising worries that somebody may be stuck. Their concern developed, driving them to 11 meters, where they found a dead figure nestled into the lower part of a well, still attached to his security rope. Sergey had deteriorated such a lot of that he was unrecognizable. His hardware didn't match the cavern's intricacy, raising doubts at first. It seemed to be a homicide scene, as though somebody had been put there with insignificant stuff. Sergey wore disguise overalls and traveling boots onto jamals, without stirrups, a serious slip-up in a cavern intended for long verticals, prompting fatigue. Adjacent to him lay his sacks and the remainders of his gear. Through notes and photographs on his telephone, an upsetting arrangement unfurled a drawn-out system to arrive at the lower part of the most profound cavern alone. A genuinely ludicrous thought. On August 5th, supported by the Hunt Association Lisa Alert and directed by the Abkhaz Service of Inside Issues, they coincidentally found a missing individual declaration from November 2020 in Abkhazia. At the point when they introduced photos of the found things to the assumed family member, they affirmed the ID. A urgent advancement came from the SIM card in the telephone, which held a photo looking like the one in the missing people's notification. This revelation added weight to the association between the found individual and the missing individual case. Without burning through any time, around the same time, delegates from the investigator's office and the Service of Crisis Circumstances of Abkhazia climbed to the cavern. The unfurling occasions were turning into a basic joint effort between search associations and neighborhood specialists to reveal insight into the baffling vanishing and disclosure in the profundities of the cavern. Confronting the difficult undertaking of extricating Sergey from the incredibly restricted cave, the heroes were stood up to with the unforgiving reality that a cot wouldn't work because of the cavern's limited sections. In a tragic choice, Sergey's better half was called once more, and they settled on the horrifying decision to cut Sergey into pieces for clearing a genuinely dismal and troublesome undertaking. The recuperation endeavors initiated on August 4th, with the nearby local area energizing together to accumulate gifts for the departure. By August 11th, a group of roughly 27 climbing experts had accumulated at the cavern's entry for the extraction. Parting into two gatherings, they entered the cavern to plan for the difficult assignment ahead. On August 13th, in the wake of exploring through the cavern and confronting confusions because of weighty downpours causing flooding, the group went through the night at Camp 1000. The next day, August 14th, the gathering, clad in wetsuits, plunged into the wetter and seriously testing part of the cavern, where they found Sergey. The heroes continued to gently eliminate the body, cutting Sergey into 10 pieces and cautiously pressing each piece into uncompromising packs. Over the course of the following couple of days, the gatherings confronted the difficult and relentless undertaking of pulling these sacks through difficult situations, a really nerve-wracking experience. At long last, on August 16th, following 4 days of serious exertion, the two gatherings arose on a superficial level, each conveying sacks containing the remaining parts of Sergey. It was subsequently uncovered that Sergey had entered the cavern illicitly. He shouldn't have been there in any case, as passage requires applying and being on a register, which he was not. This likewise made sense of why no one had started a quest for him prior. Further examinations uncovered that the hardware Sergey brought into the cavern was horrendously deficient, eventually prompting his lamentable death. Sergey was subsequently let go by his lamenting family, abandoning 2 youngsters. Regardless of the pitiful conditions, his family offered significant thanks and profound regard for every one of the people who took part in the difficult and grisly activity. Totally, this is obviously a tragic story. Sergey's choice to investigate the most profound cavern on the planet alone, abandoning a spouse and youngsters, to be sure appears very dumbfounding. It seems he could have been to some degree credulous about the dangers implied, deciding to set out on such an unsafe excursion without illuminating anybody and lacking legitimate hardware. Eventually, this is a heartbreaking story of a beginner caver endeavoring to overcome the world's most profound cavern, and it didn't end well, tragically. An honorable notice goes to the recuperation group whose exhausting endeavors in removing his body, an errand that many would see as unbelievably testing, merit acknowledgement. Find happiness in the hereafter. Sergey, a strong sign of the risks one could confront while underrating the dangers of investigating the obscure alone. Gratitude for accompanying us on this amazing excursion into the profundities of the world's most profound cavern. Notwithstanding, the narrative of Sergey's investigation leaves us with blended feelings. In the event that you got the opportunity to investigate an obscure cave, could you take the dive alone, or could you pick a group experience? Share your contemplations in the remarks, and remember to hit that like button and buy in for additional spellbinding stories. Until sometime later, remain inquisitive, remain safe, and continue to investigate the secrets that make our reality so perpetually entrancing.